Welcome to Conversations with Pastors Jason and Gail Alvarez. How are you today, Mr. Alvarez?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
I'm good. So last week we tried to do this and there were a lot of technical difficulties. And last week when we were doing it, we were doing forgiveness and then we went into unforgiveness. And so the idea came that this time we should talk about forgiveness.
Yes.
And maybe the next part be unforgiveness.
Okay.
So what do you have to say about forgiveness? What's your definition of it?
Forgiveness is something that you give away so that you can enter your tomorrow without sorrow.
That's good. That's good.
But I began last week by talking about the hardest person I ever had to forgive was myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I left the keys to my Porsche outside our door on the stoop.
So okay. I think what you said from the beginning was definitely on point. And I think that for me, forgiveness is a gift that we give to ourselves, but many times we think it's a gift we're giving to the person who hurt us. And so not wanting to give them a gift, we can hold on to not being forgiving and not walking in forgiveness. And you're right, the hardest person to give the gift of forgiveness to many times is ourselves, because who knows better than us what we've done?
Yeah, that's very true.
So tell the story about the car keys. I remember this.
Well, you know what? I left my car keys outside on the stoop while I was trying to help you bring groceries into the house.
Mm-hmm.
And after the third bag of groceries, I'm looking out the kitchen window and I see my car being pulled out of the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
I was in shock. I'm thinking, who the heck is that?
I remember that.
And
we were like, who's driving it?
So I run outside and I see my beautiful car being driven away by a stranger simply because I did something foolish, like leaving my keys outside on the porch. And it just so happens that day there were people that were looking to steal cars. Nothing but the devil. I mean,
we didn't know that at the time.
Well, we didn't know, but
An
now
alert
I know.
Came.
But anyway, so when that happens, I felt so guilty and so ashamed that I had let the keys out there for a thief to just come and have a party.
So what emotions were you feeling in those moments besides shame?
I was just so bummed out. I remember getting on my knees, and the first thing I did was I forgave the person who had stolen the car. I said, Lord, I forgive that person. I don't want to walk in unforgiveness. But
So it was easy for you to forgive the person that took the car, but you are now going to have to struggle with forgiving yourself.
But I'm trying to figure out why I still have this heaviness on me after having forgiven this person that just stole my car. And I just couldn't put my finger on it. And so I asked the Lord, I said, why do I feel so heavy and why do I feel so terrible? And the Lord said to me, because although you forgave that person, you haven't forgiven yourself, and that's something I cannot do for you.
Correct.
You have to now forgive yourself and push that weight off of you, because that will really cause you a lot of heartache and pain if you are unable to do so. So it's a matter of choice. Because bottom line is this: forgiveness is a matter of choice. Someone said, I can't forgive. I said, no, you won't forgive, because it's a matter of choice.
So that's why for me it's a matter of obedience.
Yes.
And obedience is always down to a choice. You have to choose to obey.
Yeah.
And so for me, I always have to say, God, what would you do in this situation? Remember when we first got saved, we used to wear the WWJD, what would Jesus do?
Yes.
And so even today, I'll still say to myself, what would Christ do in this situation? And on the cross, here he has been put through the unimaginable. Spit at, stabbed, hung on a cross, bleeding, giving sour stuff to drink. And the first thing he says is, Father, forgive them, right? And he releases forgiveness. Yes. But yet the challenge many times is for us to release forgiveness to ourselves. Like you said, you were able to forgive them.
Yeah, that was easier.
But had a hard time.
Yes.
Because I remember you kept saying, how could I be so stupid? And you hadn't been stupid.
Yeah,
well, you had made a mistake.
But you know, it's what I thought.
Correct.
Immediately, the enemy is going to attack your mind with thoughts, try to put you down, and then get you to the point where you start putting yourself down. You know, you're stupid. You know, you should never say that about yourself. But those are the thoughts that will start coming. They're coming from an outside source first.
Correct.
Until you believe them, and then you take them as
then
your
you
own.
Own them.
Right, right. And then you begin to kind of speak like that about yourself, and even your thought life becomes polluted with thoughts, poor thoughts about yourself. But I know that you have had situations where you had a difficult time forgiving yourself.
Yeah.
And we began to talk about that, but you talk about it now.
When I was a teenager, my brother Bobby came to stay with me for the weekend. They had hitchhiked here from California. And I went to wake him up in the morning, short story, and he was dead. And in the middle of the night, I had heard him snoring really, really loud. And I said, Bobby, you're snoring so loud. And I closed the door. So he was on the couch still sleeping, and I was in the bedroom. So now I call the ambulance and they say DOA. And I said, what does that mean? And they said dead on arrival. And they took his body. And now here I am home. No one knows but me. Who am I going to tell? How am I going to tell them? And I called my grandmother because I wanted to tell somebody. I had no idea that my dad, who had been out with my brother the night before buying drugs, was at my grandmother's. And my grandmother answered the phone, and I said, Grandma, I was crying. I said, I went to wake Bobby up this morning and he was dead. And she handed the phone to my father. And I'll never forget it. And the next voice I hear is my father. And he said, Gail, what did you just tell your grandmother? And I said, Dad, I went to wake Bobby up this morning and he was dead. And he started to scream at me, that's your fault.
See?
That's your fault. He said, you should have seen when he came home last night that he was high. And you should have stayed up all night and walked him around to walk those drugs out of his system. That's your fault.
Yeah, well, the devil is the accuser.
Now here I am, a teenager, alone. They've just taken my brother's body, and here I have my dad, who turned my brother onto drugs, and who had been out stealing drugs with him the night before, telling me it's my fault.
Yeah.
That was hard to hear.
Yeah.
But what was even harder was months later, I had this deep grief and yuck about myself.
Yes.
And I wanted to know, where is this yuck? Where is this dirt? Where is this heavy coating that's seeking to drown me in quicksand coming from? And all of a sudden, I remembered that I was blaming me, not by what my dad said, although that affected me. The blame was me blaming myself that I had not gotten up early enough to keep him from dying. That I had gotten up early enough to wake him up so that he would not have died. So here I was taking false responsibility.
Yes.
My dad was trying to give me responsibility
Yes.
for my dad's for my
your son,
brother's
your
death.
brother.
I didn't take it. But then I began to blame myself for
Yes.
his death because I had not gotten up early enough to wake him up so he would have not died. That was a tough one to fight through. But like you said, that's something you have to do for yourself. God's not going to come down and take that from you. You have to be able to forgive yourself, say to yourself, I didn't do that on purpose. I would have never wanted to do that. My brother was my best friend. And so I had to talk myself through that. And when I accepted the Lord and began to have a relationship with God, again, we went on a journey where he took me on the paths of forgiving myself and learning the power of letting go and not holding tight to anything that does not belong to me.
Well, you know what? Two things, that I think about when I hear you say that, mercy is the extension of kindness and forgiveness to those who don't even deserve it, right? You understand what I just said?
But I think that's why it's easy to give it to someone else.
You're absolutely, and you see, but this is the thing about forgiveness, that forgiveness, this is what I discovered, carries with it a heavenly reward. Mm-hmm. And that reward is peace. Mm-hmm. And so when I couldn't forgive myself for something that dumb, mm-hmm. like, just, again, the enemy will use anything. And like when you were talking, I just kept hearing, he is the accuser of the brethren. Mm-hmm. Immediately he had your father begin to accuse you falsely. And the devil many times accuses us falsely, but sometimes he has reason to accuse us. Either way, there is forgiveness with God, mm-hmm. whether you're guilty or whether you're not. And that's the thing that I believe that we need to really get a hold of, is that whether you're guilty or not, there is forgiveness with God.
Correct, but if you're guilty with reason,
yes.
you need to acknowledge that and repent.
No question. It begins with repentance. And but there is forgiveness with God, like you said, if you are guilty, because in your case you weren't guilty. In my case, I was guilty.
You were guilty. You left your keys out there.
But you know what? But the burden, or the burden, the overload was released when I forgave myself. All of a sudden, just because.
Well, you released yourself. I remember watching that. You released yourself from the shame, from feeling dumb,
yeah.
and you finally got to the place where it's just a mistake. Like, I wanted to help you, Gail. So then I wanted to say, so now it's my fault? That wasn't my fault either. You began to help me with the groceries, laid your keys down, forgot they were out there, and before you know, the car's being driven
but
out of the driveway. But the
beautiful thing about that is that I discovered that forgiveness carries with it a reward. And
just
that reward
like
was peace.
Not forgiving yourself carries with it depression and oppression and the desire to commit suicide because you can never make it up.
Yes.
I mean, if I had owned those feelings about my brother, I could have never lived. It would have taken my breath away.
Well, you'd be a dead woman walking.
Which I was for a long time. And I'm grateful to God that he breathes on us and he can give us a new heart and teach us to love ourselves again, And now, I remember yesterday, you went for a walk with the dog, and you're into the birds now, making sure the birds get fed. And now you want to feed the squirrels and the chipmunks, and you want to be Grandpa Bird and make sure that everybody gets fed. But you came in the house and you said, Gail, the Lord spoke to me. He said, if I care this much about the birds and the squirrels and the chipmunks and making sure that they get fed, how much more does he love us?
We've been pastoring a long time, and I have discovered that there's so many people living with the overload of unforgiveness.
Guilt, shame, all the emotions that go with it.
And what happens to people like that is they carry this, and it becomes dead weight on them. Mm-hmm. And little by little, it begins to get them to buckle and just kind of really. I call it vibrant people who, because of holding on to something that someone did to them, or maybe they did to themselves, mm-hmm. or whatever, they become like a fly on the wall. They just lose significance, and they just fade away. Mm-hmm. They just fade away. I've seen it so much. And so the same way, like, I was looking for peace in all the wrong places. I went looking for peace in a bottle. Mm-hmm. I went looking for peace in drugs. I went looking for peace in fame, everything, whatever you can imagine. I felt that was my avenue to have peace. And I was a very, very bitter person, and I held on to unforgiveness all the time. I was not always ready to forgive people, and I was always, attacking people verbally and complaining and blah, 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 blah. And so I was miserable, and I couldn't find peace anywhere. And not knowing that the reward of peace would be to forgive people and to let people go who had hurt me. So,
but what about forgiving yourself or living that kind of a life? That's more what we're talking about. The next chapter will be
but you know what? It took years for me to forgive myself for all the horrible things I did. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of bad things. I remember we went out to dinner with a couple, with Richie Salgado when he was alive, and his wife Carolyn, and myself and you. I think Lauren was there. Mm-hmm. And my friend Richie, he was my mentor, and he was such an amazing individual. He began to talk about this person, and this person just wasn't a nice person. He was pretty messed up, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, who is he talking about, And he was talking about me,
right?
And then not long ago, we were sitting on a table with you, me, and Apostle Cassius, our son. And all of a sudden, you turned to Cassius and you said to him, "Jay, you said, Cassius, Jay was pure evil." Mm-hmm. And it hit me. I was such a wicked man. Mm-hmm. That once I got saved, I received the forgiveness of God. Mm-hmm. All right. That was like...
You recognized your need for it.
But I could not forgive myself for many, 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 many years. That was my main struggle. Mm-hmm. Forgiving myself for all the... Not really having a revelation mm-hmm. that Jesus paid it all.
Mm-hmm. And all to him we owe.
And his blood has cleansed every filthy stain,
right,
and made them white as snow, right? Mm-hmm. And for lack of knowledge, I suffered, going on without enjoying his, what I call the miracle of forgiveness, mm-hmm. because it is a miracle of God. Mm-hmm. And it was provided by the blood he shed, mm-hmm. now through the mercy seat. We go to the throne of grace to obtain mercy for our failures and grace to help us in a time of need. But so it took me years because I didn't understand that, that his blood can wash away all sins. Not only the sins that were done to you, or the hurt that was done to you, but the hurts you did to yourself, or the hurts that you committed. Mm-hmm. And when I got that revelation, and I received forgiveness. It was not until 25 years later that I left the keys on the table, and for the first time in 25 years, I began to, have this guilt and shame just grip me. And God revealed to me that unless you forgive yourself, this is something I cannot do. So thank God for the miracle of forgiveness, where He removes, the guilt, the shame, the pain, whatever you want to call it,
You've been teaching recently on the subject of the man or the woman that you could have become, or that you could become.
Oh, could you? Yeah.
Who do you think you would have become had you not learned to forgive yourself?
I would probably have really gone in a different direction. I know that for a fact. Is when you are not able to forgive yourself, that guilt, that condemnation,
it eats at you.
It begins to eat away at you like a cancer. And it begins to, like I tell people, if you find yourself in a hole, the thing you need to do is stop digging. But when you can't forgive yourself, you keep digging that hole. And you keep digging, the hole deeper and deeper and deeper until after a while, you just don't even feel or believe you can ever come out. And so darkness begins to kind of invade your life, and God only knows what would have become of me had I not had that encounter with Jesus, where Jesus revealed to me that, I forgave you. And when you forgive yourself, because I've already cleansed you.
He's cleared the slate.
It's like when He justified me, that word means
just as if
I had never sinned. So I am justified by faith, just as if I had never sinned. And so all those things I was carrying, thinking I was being godly and holy, not letting those things go, it was really, the Lord showed me, I already took all that. I already paid the price for all you did. And all you need to do now is forgive yourself. You see, like I have forgiven you. And so I can't even imagine, what would have happened to me. I don't think I would be sitting here talking to you. I don't think that I would have. I think that one path of darkness leads to other paths of darkness. It's almost like, you go through this path, and all of a sudden you start finding another path, and you just go deeper and deeper and further into darkness until after a while you just lost your way.
But then there comes a point where we stand where we can go left or right.
Yeah.
Right? So now we're not going deeper and deeper and deeper into the forest, so we don't know how to get back. We stand on a fork in the road, and we have to choose the direction that we're going to go in. And learning to be able to forgive ourselves and release it, to let it go. I mean, you said it perfectly. We are forgiven. We are justified, just as if we've never sinned. But we have to accept it, receive it, and let go of the things that we hold tight to. I remember having an abortion on the kitchen table and screaming, I want my baby back, after it was gone. And thinking, I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. If people were to say to me, what's one regret that you have in your life, that would be it. And I don't think it's something that you ever get over, but God gets you through it. And He not only gets you through it, but then He uses it to bring help and hope and healing to other people, because without a story, there is no glory. And so because I was able to go through that story, even though I didn't want it, God now takes it and He uses it. But I've learned 2 words: and that's to travel light.
Yes.
Don't take anything that God has not given me as my own.
Yes.
And don't take anything that the enemy wants to give me as my own.
Yes.
But to just travel light and walk in the forgiveness that He has made available to me to forgive myself.
And and to forgive others. You know how many people have attacked us because we were in the limelight, so to speak, as pastors, and we pastored a great church. We pastor a great church now, and you have people that come and go, and you have people that kind of pretty much you're so good to and kind to, and all of a sudden, for whatever reason, they just turn their backs on you or begin to somehow find something that's wrong with you in their eyes.
Right.
And
but then that subject is learning how to forgive them.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So I think we're going to end this one to help encourage people to be able to forgive themselves regardless of what they've done. A lot of people are struggling with not being able to forgive themselves for their past or even something that happened today. And I'd like you to pray for them to be able to receive the forgiveness of God for themselves and release it and let it go into the hands of God. Would you pray for the people?
I want you to know that forgiveness is a miracle of God. I call it the miracle of forgiveness. And today, there's grace sufficient right where you are to forgive yourself. You can't and you shouldn't carry that overload any longer. Today it ends. So I'm asking you right now, bow your head wherever you are and just say, Father, I forgive myself the same way, Jesus, you have forgiven me. I put it all into your hands and I release it to you now. And I am now declaring, I am a free man. I am a free woman. In Jesus' name. Be blessed.
Live free from today on.
Yes.
Whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And today, you have freed yourself by letting go. So live free. God bless you.
And
we love
him.
you.
And thank
Bye.
him. Thank
yes,
him for
give
the
him
miracle of
glory.
forgiveness.
Hallelujah.
All right? Blessings on you.
Bye.